King Arthur's Knights, Chapter 6, Part 3. Then, with a great company of his chief warriors, Sir Geraint visited all the bounds of his territory. Experienced guides went with him, and old men learned in the marks of the boundaries, and priests, and they renewed the mere marks that were broken down and replaced those that had been wrongfully moved. Thereafter, men lived peacefully in the land and on all the borders, for under the shadow of the strong young chief, no border lords dared to invade the land, and no fierce baron used oppression. Then, as has been his wont at the court of Arthur, Sir Geraint went to all tournaments that were held within easy reach of his kingdom. Thus he became acquainted with every mighty knight of his hands throughout the lands of Cornwall, Wales, and Logres. And so great in strength and prowess did he become that men hailed him as one of the three great heroes of the Isle of Britain, the other two being Sir Launcelot du Lake and Sir Tristram of Lyons. And though there were other great and valiant warriors, as Sir Lamorak, Sir Bors, Sir Gawain, and his brother Sir Gareth, and Sir Palomides, yet all these had been overcome by one or other of the three heroes. For as yet Sir Percival was in the forest with his widowed mother, and knew no arms but a stone or a stick. And Sir Galahad was not yet born. And these two were knights stainless of pride or any evil desire, and by that force alone did strike down every arm, however mighty, that relied on knightly prowess alone. When his fame had spread over all the kingdoms south of Trent, so that no knight that knew him or saw the device of the golden falcon on his shield would have to do with him, Sir Geraint began to seek ease and pleasure, for there was no one who would joust with him. He began to stay at home and never went beyond his wife's bower chamber, but sat and delighted in playing chess or hearing the bards of the court sing songs of glamour and wizardry, or tell him tales of ancient warriors and lovers long since dead. The whole court marveled at his slothfulness as time passed, and he changed not. He gave up the friendship of his nobles, and went not hunting or hawking, and found no pleasure but in the company of his wife, whom he dearly loved. Men began to scoff and jeer at his name over their cups in hall, or as they rode with hawk on fist to the hunting, or as they tilted in the lists. And the lawless lords upon the marshes of the land began to stir and to dare, and when none came to punish them, their plunderings and oppressions grew. Soon these things came to the ears of the old King Urban, and great heaviness was upon him. And he called the Lady Enid to him one day, and with stern sorrow in his eyes spoke thus: "Fair woman, is it thou that hast turned my son's spirit into water? Is it thy love that hath made his name a byword among those who should love him because he is not as he once was, a man no one could meet in arms and overcome? Is it thou that hast sunk him in slothfulness, so that the wolfish lords and tyrant barons beyond his marshlands begin to creep out of their castle holds and tear and maim his people, and wrest from them and him broad lands and fertile fields?" "Nay, lord, nay," said Enid, and he knew from the tears in her brave eyes that he spoke the truth. "It is not I, by my confession unto heaven. I know not what hath come to my dear lord, for there is nothing more hateful to me than his unknightly sloth, and I know not what I may do. For it is not harder, Lord, to know what men say of my dear husband than to have to tell him and see the shame in the eyes of him I love." And Enid went away weeping sorely. The next morning, when Enid awoke from sleep, she sat up and looked at Geraint sleeping. The sun was shining through the windows and lay upon her husband, and she gazed upon his marvelous beauty and the great muscles of his arms and breast, and tears filled her eyes as she leaned over him. "Alas," she said half aloud, "am I the cause that this strength, this noble and manly beauty have all lost the fame they once enjoyed? Am I the cause that he hath sunk in sloth, and men scoff at his name and his strength?" And the words were heard by Geraint, and he felt the scalding tears fall upon his breast, and he lay appearing to be asleep, yet he was awake. A great rage burned in him, so that for some moments he knew not what to do or say. Then he opened his eyes, as if he had heard and felt nothing, and in his eyes was a hard gleam. He rose and swiftly dressed, and called his squire. "Go," he said to the man, "prepare my dress-shirt, and get old armor and a shield with no device thereon, old and rusty, and say naught to none. And do thou," he said to his wife, "rise and apparel thyself, and cause thy horse to be prepared, and do thou wear the oldest riding robe thou hast, and thou wilt come with me." So Enid rose and clothed herself in her meanest garments. Then Geraint went to his father and said, "Sir, I am going upon a quest into the land of Logres, and I do not know when I may return. Do thou therefore keep our kingdom till I return." "I will do so, my son," said Urban, "but thou art not strong enough to go through the lands of Logres alone. Wilt thou not have a company with thee?" "But one person shall go with me," said Geraint, "and that is a woman. Farewell." Then he put on the old and rusty suit of armor, and took the shield with no device, and a sword with a lance, and then mounting his horse, he took his way out of the town. And Enid went with him on her palfrey, marveling what all this might mean. Geraint called unto her and said sternly, "Go thou and ride a long way before me, and whatever ye see or hear concerning me, say not, and turn not back, and unless I speak to thee, speak not thou to me." All day they rode thus, and deeper they sank into a desolate land, where huge rocks jutted from the starved soil, and there was no sound or sight of living thing, except it was the wolf looking from his lair beneath a stone, or the breaking of a branch, as the brown bear on a distant hillside tore at a tree to get a honeycomb, and blinked down at them, marveling, maybe to see a knight and a lady in his desolate domain. When, late in the afternoon, their long shadows marched before them down a broad green road which they had struck upon, Enid's heart suddenly lifted to see the white walls and roofs of what looked like a rich town. For she knew not what was in her lord's mind, and feared lest his strange anger should push him to go on through the night, and so become a prey to robbers or wild animals. But she marveled that there was no sight or sound of people, no carters or travelers going to or coming from the city, and no smoke rose above the housetops. When they came near, she saw the wall of the gate was broken down, and that along the broad road beyond the wall, the grass waved high across the street, and the little wooden booths and cabins beside the road were rotting and decayed. Anon, they rode into a broad marketplace or forum, where white buildings rose above them, the windows gaping, grass growing on the roofs or in the crannies of the walls, and the doorways choked with bushes. And out of the broad hallway of the basilica, she saw the gray form of a wolf walk and slink away in the shadows. With a sinking heart, she knew that this was one of the fair cities which the Romans had built, and when they had left Britain, this town had been deserted and left desolate, to become a place where the wolf and the bear made their lairs, where the beaver built his dam in the streams beneath the wall of the palace, and where robbers and wild men lay hid, or the small people of the hills came and made their magic and weaved their spells, with the aid of the spirits haunting the desolate hearths of the Romans. And as Enid checked her horse and waited for Geraint to come up, that she might ask him whether it was his pleasure to pass the night there, she saw down the white street before her the forms of men, creeping and gathering in the gloom. Then, fearing lest they should fall upon her husband before he was aware of them, she turned her horse and rode toward him, and said, "Lord, dost thou see the wild men which gather in the shadows there in the street before us, as if they would attack thee?" Geraint lifted up his angry eyes to hers. "Thou wert bid to keep silent," he said, "whatsoever thou hast seen or heard. Why dost thou warn one whom thou dost despise?" Even as he spoke, from the unbroken houses through which they had crept to assail the single knight, dashed 10 robbers, naked of feet, evil of look, clothed in skins. One leaped at the knight with a knight in his hand, to be cut down halfway in his spring by Sir Geraint's fierce sword stroke. Then, while Enid stood apart, terror in her heart, prayer on her lips, she saw him as if he were in the midst of a pack of tearing wolves, and in the silent street with its twilight was the sudden clash of steel, the howls and cries of wounded men. Then she was aware that 6 lay quiet on the road, and the remaining 4 broke suddenly away toward the shelter of the houses. But 2 of these Sir Geraint pursued and cut down before they could reach cover. He rejoined her in silence and sought for a place of lodging. And in a small villa they found a room with but one door. Here they supped from the scrip of food and the bottle of wine which Enid had brought, and there they slept that night. On the morrow they pursued their way and followed the green road out of the ruined city until they reached the forest. And in the heat and brightness of the high noon, the green and coolness of the forest ways were sweet, and the sound of tiny streams hidden beneath the leaves was refreshing. Then they came upon a plain where was a village surrounded by a bank of earth, on which was a palisade. And there was a wailing and weeping coming from between the little mud cabins therein. And as they approached, they saw in the middle green 4 knights in armor, and a crowd of poor frightened folk about them. As they passed the gate of the village, a poor man ran from the group and threw himself before Sir Geraint. "O Sir Knight," he cried, full piteously, "if thou art a good knight and a brave, do thou see justice done here. For these 4 lords would cut my father's throat if he say not where his money is hid." "Are they his proper lords?" asked Geraint. "Nay, Sir Knight," said the man, "our land is Geraint's, and these lords say that he sleeps all day, and so they will be our masters. And they do ever oppress us with fine and tax and torture." Therewith Sir Geraint rode through the gate of the village and approached the group. He saw where the 4 knights stood, cruelly torturing a poor old man whom they had tied to a post. And the sweat stood upon the peasant's white face, and the fear of death was in his eyes. "Lords, lords," he cried in a spent voice, "I have no money, for you did take all I had when you told us our Lord Geraint was become a court fool." "Thou miser," jeered one of the knights, "that was 2 months agone, and thou hast something more by now. Will this loose thy secret carrion?" At the cruel torture, the man shrieked aloud, and by reason of the pain, his head sank, and he slid down the post in a swoon. And a young woman rushed forth, threw her arm about the hanging body, and with flashing eyes, turned and defied the knights. Next moment it would have gone ill with her, but the voice of Sir Geraint rang out. "Ho there, Sir Knights," he cried, "or Sir Wolves, I know not which ye are. Have ye not to do but to squeeze poor peasants of mean savings?" And we'll pause here, and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.